Now, I am informed that counting the fellows that are present and the proxies that we've received in the mail, that a quorum does exist for the conduct of this meeting. Therefore, I officially would like to call the meeting to order and ask those fellows present, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of last year's annual meeting held on October 24th, 2020. Okay. Can someone second the motion? Okay, great. All in favor? Very good. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. All right, the minutes have been approved, and now I should like to turn the meeting over to our president, Udo Wartenberg.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you all for being here. It's our 164th annual meeting. And 164 meetings equal 164 or even a little bit more of history. And as our curator emeritus, Michael Bates, move this forward. Does the PowerPoint, okay. You know, into the next. As our emeritus curator, this does not, can I just say, before we go on, this is not my, this is Gilles' PowerPoint. I will just go on and not mine, but that's all right because I can talk without any of this. We just celebrated his 80th birthday in this room, and he reminded us that 80 years he's been alive with 164 years of ANS, that this is sort of almost half his life, as well as to the ANS, of course, being around when you look at this country overall for almost 2/3 of its existence. Rather extraordinary to think of it like this, as always, very interesting when we listen to Mike. So again, a very happy birthday to Mike. We had several other big birthdays of staff and trustees, and I just want to highlight here our volunteer Ted Withington and Howard Minnes, our trustee and supporter, both turning 90. For Ted, I basically barely believed it, which was extraordinary. And Ken, our really beloved chairman, who's really been with this institution, clearly, as you just heard, for such a long time, we threw him a birthday party in this room, and we promised him a gift, and it was COVID. So this gift, of course, came late, but he knows what it is, because we produced a chairman's medal, which was is the old ANS, original ANS membership medal. And it's now my very great honor, Ken, to finally give you your much deserved birthday present. Beautifully engraved, you're not allowed to touch it, as I was told. Just immediately, no, it's like the numismatist in the room here laughing. Once you can, we will give you a pair of gloves, you can take it out.
Okay.
Tilt it as far forward as you dare. Okay. That's nice. Hold it up a little higher for me. Yeah, that's great. Can you both look in the camera? Both look right in here for me. Right in here, can you?
You're supposed to look. I don't know, we're supposed to look at the medal or look in the camera.
No, right in here. Excellent. That's great.
All right, enough pictures.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll treasure it, believe me. I will. Thank you so much.
And this is a medal that now, as chairman, it is his, he can now hand it over to other well-deserving candidates. So this is a chairman's medal. Very nice piece, so you can show it to the other numismatists. So all of us are very proud to be part of such a distinguished organization that survived for so long, it is, as you will hear now, thriving. Many organizations in this country have met a less fortunate fate. And even at the American Numismatic Society, there were times when things did not look so rosy. As you will hear in the next hour and a half or so, we had a stellar year, both financially and in almost all other aspects. And on behalf of the trustees, I would like to thank all of you who generously contributed. And here I mean, not just financially, money is obviously important, but also with objects, with their time, with their expertise, and research. Here, I'd like to extend our very special thanks first to Gilles, who is now not in the, oh, he's standing up. Thank you, Gilles. A really marvelous executive director. And I can say that because having been in this position myself, he's really endured a time in his early years that nobody really would want to have. And he's done a remarkable job in this new position over the last 18 months in particular. You will hear more from him and the staff. So while things go obviously well, the Board of Trustees is mainly concerned how the future of the society might look. All of you, and this is really an announcement for those of you who hopefully are still online as well as in the room, will receive a member survey in the next couple of weeks, either by email, and you can also get it in the mail, which our trustee, Michael Beale, the chair of the Membership and Outreach Committee, has put together. And the board and Gilles would very much like your input through this survey to make sure that we hear your voices, where the ANS should go, what do members want, and we're also going to give this to some people who are lapsed members to get an idea why people leave the ANS. It will also not be new to those of you who've been members for a few years that the board's main concern remains our location of the headquarters, of the future headquarters in particular. And here is some context of our current situation. The space in which the ANS has been leasing since 2007 will have to be vacated by 2028. So this is less than 7 years. It currently costs the ANS over $1.6 million in leasing costs, operating security annually. And this sum goes up every year. ANS is able to afford this, sort of, but in the long term, this is not sustainable. The lease is renewable for 5 years after it is over, which is technically a possibility, but it is highly unlikely that the society could afford such a renewal. And those of you who've come down here only have to look how this neighborhood is transforming with Google, Disney, and everyone moving here, even during COVID. The society has also tried, unsuccessfully, I should say, to form relationships or a relationship with 2 of the large universities here in Manhattan. But at every point, the issue of space and cost ultimately prevented any concrete proposals. So we, as members of the board, and there are some particularly active individuals, have been looking for opportunities in New York that could solve the ANS's needs for space. And as an aside, it has also become clear that the ANS needs more space than we have here. So we're looking for something that is bigger because we have a number of spaces that we're currently leasing that are not in this, what you're seeing here. The Mako storage in Brooklyn being one of them. So New York has proven to be almost impossible, although in early 2020, the ANS was considering a gift of a building in Long Island City, which had been left unrenovated. This got quite far. However, the conditions of the gift and the renovation cost, well in excess of $20 million, were not ideal. And then sadly, actually, the owner, who was quite interested in donating it, died very, very quickly of COVID. We also looked at condos that are similar size to this, and here obviously cost is $25–30 million, something ANS is hard to find. So it's become clear that even with the donation of a building or a space in New York, enormous expenses would be associated. Some of the society's trustees, me included, therefore began to explore other options. And here, Philadelphia and Chicago. Philadelphia is something that Sid Martin was particularly involved in, are high on our list. I can now report that there are serious discussions with the University of Chicago underway. The two institutions are looking at a proposal that would allow a close collaboration between the two institutions, which envisages the creation of joint programming in the field of monetary history, economics, material culture, numismatics, one of them, but also classics. The idea is that the ANS will remain an independent institution as it is now, with its own endowment, board, staff, and so on. But the university would provide space, and here we're talking about part of a building that is custom built on campus for very inexpensively without major lease cost. Although these are early days in these discussions, we are cautiously optimistic. And I'd like to remind you that such an enterprise usually will take years, apart from the negotiations, until there's a build out. So we're looking at a minimum of 5 years probably for this to be completed, if it does come to an agreement. What I can say is that the ANS is extremely fortunate to have friends, both on the boards and otherwise, who are willing to move this project along. And I'd like to express my sincere thanks to these individuals for coming up with these ideas and helping us to bring what is potentially two of the great institutions of this country together. So you've already seen when the slides were going through. I now would like to turn to a more somber part of this meeting. This wonderful picture here. Over the last year, we've lost some of our great supporters and trustees. And the only reason you're seeing me here speaking as president is because our beloved President Sid passed away on the 19th of January. His leadership and support of our institution was exemplary, and we all lost a great friend and a truly great numismatist. He received the Huntington Medal. Those of you who are present remember this very moving ceremony just before his death, in recognition of his great scholarly publications. Sid was really a true Renaissance man. He was a businessman, a scholar, a collector, a very rare individual. And he was active to his very last day, thinking of his family, of other numismatists, of the ANS. And this became very clear because about 3-4 weeks after he had passed away, a check arrived from him. This came around the 11th of February over a quite significant sum of money he had promised to give in November or December. And of course, I did not want to remind him of this promise. And this check was dated to the day he died. That was Sid. It really made me cry, in fact. It's upsetting. I miss him. and we will all miss him much. And here, this wonderful picture, just before I turn to Joel, of him and Sharon on a trip. These are the happy days, and that's what I look back at when I think of him. Another serious loss for the ANS was the death of Joel Anderson, who died very unexpectedly on 12th of October 2020 at the age of 76. He and his brother Charles were ANS trustees for many years, and during his time were instrumental in contributing very generously to the ANS's renovation of 75 Varick Street, the space we're in now. Joel was one of America's most successful businessmen. He was from Alabama, as the whole family, and the businesses that were created by the Anderson family include some of the really famous enterprises: Anderson Media Corporation, Whitman, Books A Million, as well as what was my favorite, TNT Fireworks. If you've ever shot a firework on 4th of July, it's almost certainly this would have been from Joel's company. But what we remember him, and this is this picture here at ANS Best, is Joel's wise counsel at board meetings, but also this impossible to forget, this joie de vivre he had at the galas, where he single-handedly was responsible for bidding up anything. The famous plastic ruler will always come to mind, that sold for $50,000. To astronomical heights. He knew it was for a good cause, and he made it so much fun. He will not be forgotten. A short word here about Don Patrick, our former president. He died the financial year before this, but he brought so many changes to the society that I'd like to just remember him also. During my early years as executive director, I learned much from him. And over the years, he spoke to me daily. That was his very hands-on approach as being president, a bit like me and Gilles. I talked to him daily too. He was responsible for giving this society millions and millions of dollars, and he wanted to make sure they were properly spent, in particular in the building projects that we were undertaking at 140 William Street. These were not always easy times, as some or many of you will remember, and the drastic cuts that Bonn pushed through, though, prepared the ANS for better times and saved us perhaps from even more extreme measures one would have had to be taken. And I'm happy to announce that a contribution from his estate of 1.35 million is a final goodbye from a great man. Let us now turn to the end of my presentation. And this is really the fun part. It is a great honor for our society to award for the first time the Collier Prize in Ancient Numismatics. We're very pleased to have here today in person the widow of James Collier, and this is a self-portrait you see here of him. Carol and in the back. The prize, which was sort of her idea, we worked on this, is named after her late husband, Professor James Collier, who taught art history at Auburn University. And his main interest was in Renaissance art and perspective. Apart from being a painter, he was also a passionate collector of ancient coinage. And the prize for the best book was announced last year, and we asked for either books, monographs, or web-based digital projects in the field of ancient numismatics. The winner of this prize, which we will announce now, will receive $20,000. And the entrants were the following candidates: Richard Abdi, Roman Imperial Coinage, Volume 2, Part 3. Vincent Drost, Le Trésor de Saint-Germain, Les Arpagions, Simon Glenn, Money and Power in Hellenistic Bactria, Pierre-Olivier Auchard, Lydie Terre d'Empire, Dane Kurt, Greek and Roman provincial coins, Lydia, Jack Nupetlian, coinage of the Orontes Valley, Olivier L'Empereur, Recherche numismatique sur l'Empereur Pertinax, and last, George Watson, Connections, Community and Coinage. I should say this was a very strong field, and the international jury of distinguished numismatists spent several months assessing and studying these submissions, some of them of very considerable length, before coming to what was not an easy decision. So if any of you authors are watching this, and we informed them, and you are not the winner, do not be disappointed, because these books were all great and I recommend everyone to read them. So now I'm going to call on Austin Andrews, our Assistant Director in charge of membership, who will come forward to announce the winner.
Thank you. Got this. The winner here. All right. A couple more seals here. Get through them. All right. All right. For the first Collier Prize in Ancient Numismatics, the winner is Roman Imperial Coinage, Volume 2, Part 3, from AD 117 to AD 138, Hadrian, by Richard Abney.
So this is the book, an impressive, and Richard, I don't know, I can't see whether you were there. If you are, many, many congratulations. It's well deserved. And for all the others, I'm sorry. And I very much hope that the next prize, which will be announced, that we will have many entrants again. And my thanks again to Caroline for making this possible. I'm now going to hand over to Ken Edlow for the Treasurer's Report.
All right, I'm going to make the treasurer's report, as Uda said. Now, as you've heard from Uda, it's been a very good year for the ANS. First, I'll give you some details about our revenues and expenses when compared with what we budgeted at the beginning of the year. Keep in mind that the numbers I'm going to give you aren't audited, and the audit will occur in the next few weeks or so, but I'm sure they're very close to what has been booked. In any event, the ANS staff budgeted income of about $4 million for the fiscal year that ended September 30th, 2021. Of that, the source of that money would be recorded as $2.1 million, which is 5% of the 3-year average endowment, and contributions such that we expect from that we get from members and trustees of $938,000, and then we also get incomes separately from members' dues, trust income, publication revenues, gala income, etc. But all in all, whereas we budgeted about $4 million, we took in $5,350,000. Much of this increase was attributable to the Don Partridge gift, bequest that Uda mentioned, and the Sultan bequest. So in that sense, our revenues came in about $1.3 million higher than budgeted. On the expense side, the staff had expected to spend $4.2 million in fiscal 21. Well, they actually spent $4.350 million. So it's $150,000 more. Part of that was because we hired some additional staff and we had some higher legal costs. On the other hand, because of COVID, we were able to cut various expenses. Wish we hadn't, but we were forced to, such as lectures and travel and exhibitions, etc. So overall, from a budget perspective, we wound up $1 million better than what would have been anticipated. However, that's just a small part of the picture, because fortunately, with a good stock market, the ANS's portfolio endowment grew by 10.7 million, or 22.6% in fiscal year 21, and we finished the year at 57.1 million against 47.4 million on October 1, 2020. The bulk of this 57 million are managed by Vanguard with input and assistance and final authority of the ANS Finance Committee. The portfolio itself is invested about 76% in stocks and 24% fixed income related securities. And of the stocks, about half are United States companies and the other half are in Europe, or the rest of the world, I should say. Well, I do want to now thank all the members of the Finance Committee, includes myself, and Vanguard. Vanguard's really done well by us, and by chance I happened to stumble on them some years ago, and it was a great break for the ANS. They're doing a great job for us. And they work very hard on our behalf. Well, that's the end of my report, unless there are any questions.
Yes.
Hello. I'm David Hendon, and I'm first vice president and chair of the ANS Nomination and Governance Committee. The Nominating and Governance Committee report was mailed to Fellows of the Society, which is our voting membership, in July, and was posted as well on the ANS website. Copies of it are available for the fellows in attendance. I will say that the Fellows of the Society represent a maximum of 225 people, which includes honorary life fellows and life fellows in the overall membership of the Society. As of this afternoon, we have 221 fellows, and I'm pleased to report that pursuant to Article 3, Section 1 of the bylaws, 7 associate members were elected as fellows of the Society at this morning's regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. And I'm sure these names are familiar to most of you. These are the 7: Dick Eidswick of Ann Arbor, Oliver Hoover of Burlington, Ontario, Alexander Kropf of Westport, Massachusetts, Lawrence Schwimmer of New York and California, Alan Stahl of Ossining, New York, Dr. Francois Velde of Chicago, Illinois, and Dr. Liv Yarrow of Brooklyn, New York. Congratulations to all of you, and we look forward to your continued participation in this society. Now, as fellows here, it is our job to proceed with the business of the election of the trustees. Fellows of the Society are allowed to vote at this meeting. As per Article 4, Section 6 of the bylaws, 20 fellows present in person or by proxy shall constitute a quorum, and we do have a quorum by proxy and in person. All fellows present were asked to sign in, and for those fellows present, if you have not yet signed in, anybody here who hasn't signed in with Joanne, who has not given her proxy, Joanne is right there. And if anybody has their proxies and hasn't turned them in, please give them to Joanne. Now, while the proxies are being counted, let me tell you the names of the following 6 trustee candidates who have been nominated for election or re-election for the term ending in 2024. I think most everybody is here or was here today or yesterday. And we do have one new trustee coming on, and that's our friend David Albert, who's here of New York. Being re-nominated as trustees are Professor Jared Bacharach of Seattle, Scott Buck of Allentown, Pennsylvania, Ken Edlow, our chairman, Noel Lenski of Woodbridge, Connecticut, and Dr. Howard Minners, who we saw earlier, or actually some of us saw earlier at the board meeting, of Bethesda, Maryland. Would one of the fellows please second those nominations? Thank you. A second, I heard a second, okay. So is there anybody who has not turned in their proxy that wishes to vote? If so, please raise your hand if you approve of these nominations. If your proxy's in, you don't need to raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 people here in favor. Opposed? None. Okay, so there are 8 hands raised. And how many proxies did we have, Joanne?
We have 76 proxies.
And we had 76 proxies
For a total of 84.
for a total of 84 votes. So thank you very much. The trustees have been elected. Congratulations to all of the trustees. I just want to finish by saying that I feel incredibly privileged. I've been involved with the ANS for almost 50 years, pretty actively for a little longer than 20 years. And we have and have had over that last 20 years a remarkable staff. We have people here who are basically numismatists or classicists who have been doing all kinds of things to further the goals of this society. We have a studio here for making TV shows, broadcasts. We are set up to have our trustee meetings as part virtual and part in person, and it works perfectly. And the people who set this up aren't people who had any training or background. It's our good people who are motivated to do wonderful things for the ANS. And I just want to say that this afternoon, following me, you're going to hear from some of the curators, or primarily from the curators, but don't forget that for every curator you hear today, there are 1 or 2 more staff people who are doing lots and lots of really wonderful work, and please join me in thanking them. Oh, Gio, sorry, I'm supposed to introduce you. And now our executive director, Gio.
No. Yes. You have seen some of the slides already, so it's not that funny. Anyway, thank you for being here, or following on screen. As you've heard from our president, Ute Wartenberg, and from Ken Edlow, our chairman, we have been through an exceptional year, and I'd like to start by, I'll be thanking some groups of people during this short 5-6 minutes. First of all, about the staff. We reopened in July, and when I tell friends we reopened in July, people think July 21. That was July 20. So we were back when nobody was back, and it provided us with a lead compared to other non-for-profit. I don't want to call that a competition. We're not quite a private company in that sense. We are non-for-profit, But we need to realize that in the field of some comments. In the field of knowledge acquisition, numismatics, classics, modern numismatics, I mean, all these fields, we were at that time the only one, at least in North America, to be back and active. And this played a major role in the development of our online programs. You cannot have a long table, a monitor, or any of a Lyceum have with slides. It's very different. We are showing the coins live, a high resolution HDMI connected camera goes onto the coin. I mean, I wish you could see what we call the studio. And we are able to display these things live even better than if people were here. We have people attending these shows from Australia when it's night time. So it's being here was extremely important, and we've got to a point where we know our members much better than we used to in the past. You had to travel to New York. Now it's like we're seeing people on screens, they ask questions, whether live or through the chat. And the dialogue we have established is much more dense and inclusive in the sense of geographical inclusiveness than it used to be. You don't need to live in the tri-state area for enjoying all these programs. So this has translated into many new members. Echelle, our Director of Development, will provide more information about this, and into an exceptional year of financial giving. Okay. Thank you. Okay. This doesn't seem to work. Anyway, so Barry printed that ticket yesterday. In our administration, he's still using these old small computer machine with paper. And the question was, how much did we receive this year? And you see the number at the bottom, which is the highest level of donation I can remember of, so at least for the past 10 years. And if we're looking at the composition, next slide. Thank you. If we're looking at the components of this year, obviously we had some very large bequests that our president has commented about, but I'd like to point out as well, grants like the NEH, the Arete Foundation, some large donations, and there are 2 or 3 trustees who are, very generous with 100,000 plus donations. But the number I'd like to mention the most, actually, this number. And behind this $423,000, there are about 350 individual donors, which means that about 20% of our membership base gives more than membership. And no gift is too small. We're extremely grateful seeing sometimes gift as small as $10 or $20. There's one person, I don't know if he's following us today, who gives every month for mentees for the collection online database. It's a small amount, but it's every month. So that's very extraordinary. So I want to take one specific example, and I wish we were seeing even more of that. As a result of an history of significant gift, we have several members, and particularly 2 trustees, with a strong interest into European medieval and Renaissance numismatics. These 2 trustees, over the past few years, kept giving very significant amount into the endowment funding our medieval and European medieval and Renaissance curator. Now his full title is a Mark Sultan Associate Curator of Medieval and Renaissance and Early European Numismatics. Then came the Lottie Sultan bequest, $500,000. As a result of all of this, we're now about fully funded in that position. Does it mean we need to stop? Well, not necessarily, because the more money we're having in the chair, the more we can fund actual research, like traveling or like excavation sites or conferences or helping with publications. But this is now an area of of our curatorial team that is safe and sustainable. We do not need to spend money from the general fund to pay for this cost. And I wish we would expand this. For example, we have some underfunded chairs like the Greek or Roman or the executive director chair, for that matters. At the same time, part of the collection is almost not covered at all because we don't have enough resources to hire permanently curators for Islamic, East and South Asian or African numismatics. So these are areas I wish we would see in our lifetime covered. One word about the gala. So this year we'll have a real gala. Last year was a virtual gala. And part of our financial success this year came from this virtual gala. And I'd like to thank all the people who came forward and purchased virtual tables instead of actual tables and helped the ANS having a very successful virtual gala last year. So that was unexpected. When we started to think about a virtual gala, at the beginning was like, are we going to draw any income? That was not so clear. And we could as well cover the cost of this wonderful movie that's now available on our YouTube channel about an history of the ANS through the eyes of Agnes Baldwin, who was a curator in the early 20th century and then came back in the 30s. So, okay, next slide. These are some pics from the gala last year. And let's move on now. So, back, thank you. I'd like here to make a reflection on the nature of the ANS. So on Friday, I had a distinguished, actually 3 visitors, and one of them is a scholar in biblical study. And they told me, oh, I'd like to see your Judean coins. It's not at all a field in which I work, so I was a little bit lost. But the good thing is that I was discovering it. So I went to Peter and David Yoon, please tell me what is this and this. Okay, David Hennin was not here, otherwise he would have briefed me in advance. But yet, I was able to show these coins, and then I realized, oh my God, I mean, we have everything. We have the early Samarian coins. We have coins with the name Pontius Pilatus, and so he's not just a guy in the gospel, he's somewhere on coins, so the guy did exist. Then we have the Jewish revolt, the one from 66 and the Bar Kokhba in the 130s, with all these wonderful silver and bronze coins. And it's like, well, I'm from Europe, and from my accent, you even know where I'm from more precisely. But if I were in Paris, I would be a civil servant. I would be working for the Bibliothèque Nationale. If you had stayed in Germany or in England, you'd be working for the British Museum or the Berlin Münzcabinet. So we would be civil servants. We would beg the state to send us some, to fund for our budget, and we would take our orders from some Minister of Cultural Affairs or something like that. Well, here we are, our own people. Actually, that's, fellows and trustees here finance this endeavor and make the decisions. So we enjoy a level of strategic freedom that's unequal among major institutions of learning in the field. Next. So this is possible thanks to the gift we have received and we will receive. I'd like to take some example. At that point, even though the NS was the first collection to be fully digitized, only about a quarter of our coins and banknotes are photographed. Now, this said, thanks to one of our trustees, we're moving forward with a medieval and Renaissance collection. We'll have 22,000 more coins photographed pretty soon. In terms of acquisitions, we have a wonderful collection, but yet our coverage ratio in the Roman collection is just 50% of all existing RIC reference, Roman Imperial coinage. So we can go further. Right now, we are able to organize hybrid conferences like COAC or the Witchonki conference. So the curators will speak about it. This needs funding, and COAC was made possible by two generous gifts from two INS fellows. So funding allows us not only to exist, but conduct research. Research is an expensive endeavor. It involves traveling, it involves publishing, it involves sometimes supporting outside scholars in their research that will help our research as well. I'd like to highlight as well that providing resource to non-ANS people is a key mission of the organization. The Collier Prize is probably the most critical case this year, since it's an extremely large gift we are giving to people who are not NS staff. Actually, NS staff are prohibited from being part of the Collier Prize. But at the same time, we can do other gesture to help the field, and we will announce soon some mini grants for the 2022 Numismatic Congress in Warsaw. Then we have all these technological investment. This meeting would not be possible, the long tables, monitors, and so on, without the equipment that we have been acquiring. So next one. Next slide, please. So VNS gives awards as well, as you know, the Huntington Award, and this year went to our beloved former president, Sid Martin. And we provide most of the years another award. So next slide, please. Which is the Saltus Award. There was a virtual hybrid ceremony in Berlin in December 2020, and this year went to German artist Anna Franziska Schwarzbach, with a program that included our president. These are some pics from the Huntington and the Saltus Award from last year. Next slide. So I'm getting to my conclusion. I would say that VNS, we have a sense of being a family with the staff, a family with our members, with our visitors, with people we're seeing on screen or in person. And it's probably what makes VNS an extremely sustainable institution, and the way we went through the COVID crisis and the way we have emerged from this crisis somehow stronger than we used to be. Next slide. That's this one is from one of our long tables where that provides a sense of, we have about 60, 70, sometimes more than 100 people connected each Friday, with a core group of people, maybe 30, 40 people who are every Friday, and the others change every week. Next slide. So it's an expanding family. I didn't plan for Nathan to be cut on the screen. I didn't plan for this. You seeing, thank you. So Nathan, John Thomason, and Jaharia Knowles, who was an intern this summer and wrote a wonderful paper for the magazine number 3 this year on the planters token money, this kind of cardboard that were used as money to pay for people working on farms and fields. Next slide. Now it's time to thank the people who are behind the screen. You're always seeing the same faces. I'm sorry, Tommy, Peter, so you're used to us. But as David was saying, for each of us are at least 1 or 2 persons behind the scene making this possible. So this is what we have: a studio on the left-hand side. So that's doing a long table with Chief Curator Peter Van Alphen, and Alan and Peter and Ben, making sure that the whole program runs smoothly. On the right-hand side, there's a control room that is functioning right now to make that meeting possible. Next slide. So more people behind the scene, but who are critical to the organization. Some of you may know Joan, in the central piece on this image, our museum administrator, a key component of the organization. On the top left-hand side, Echelle, who is our director of membership and development. Andrew Reinhardt on the left, about to be buried under books. He survived, that's good, and he's with us today. I'd like to mention on the top right-hand side, Cassandra, our part-time accountant, who is an extremely important member of our team. And Michael on the lower right-hand side, our security guard. It's very important to make sure the collection is secure. Next slide. So more people behind the scene. You may know some of them. I mean, Garfield is a celebrity of himself, so I don't think I need to comment. But you may not know Adia on the right-hand side, who has been helping VNS in different capacities for quite many years. She's a very good cataloger, for instance. Ethan Gruber is our director of data science, obviously with some piece of tech on his head. David Yoon, our curator of medieval and European coins, who is often shy, and so I wanted to show a picture of him. And Barry, our accountant, obviously critical. Barry is not around. How do we process gifts and how do we process expenses? So everybody is so critical in this organization. At the very end, next slide, please. So this was a post-gala pics. There was a piece of news about a week ago. So on my iPhone, sometimes I look at the news, I mean, what's happening in the world. And then a piece of news that attracted my attention was like, oh, COVID may we hear about people who quit the job and the pressure on salaries, the great unhappiness or the great people leave the jobs. And the paper was saying, but actually it may be an opportunity for some companies. And we polled some CEOs, and about a third of the CEOs replied, or HR manager replied, but by the way, we are better off than we used to, and we retain our people. And the NS falls in that league. So I read the comments, and I thought, yeah, we provide sick leave. We have quite a generous vacation regime. We provide health insurance. We provide retirement plan, and so forth and so forth. I mean, being European, these things seems natural. In America, they're not, and we have to thank Ute, who I guess brought here this part of European culture, which is that we need to care for the employees, and it's probably one of the reasons behind our resilience. Beyond this, yes, I think it's a fun place most of the time. We work under pressure, but we tend to laugh about it. So Echelle came to see me this morning and said, okay, I need 3 months vacations now. I said no, but that's the kind of things that happen behind the scene here. So next slide, and I think it may be my last one. That's when we celebrated that was what we call our vaccination party, when everybody was vaccinated at VNS. We have a wonderful roof on top of this building, so when it's sunny, it's pretty nice to have lunch outside. So I will end with this happy notes. You sing Kenneth Low's 80th birthday as well, and leave the podium to whoever comes next. Is this Andrew? No, Echelle. Oh yeah, obviously Echelle. Thank you.
So I'm glad Ben is doing this and not me, because otherwise I might be reporting on something in the curatorial department, and that would be not a good idea. Not yet.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
That works.
Thanks very much. So it's nice to see everybody today, and those people who are online, I don't see you, but I'm glad you're there. So you've already heard from Gilles and Uta and Ken that we've had a really good year from the development point of view. Membership is up, contributions have increased also significantly. We had 185 new members this year, and that might not sound like a big number to you, but actually it's an extraordinary number for us. And they came from all over the place. So they came from 18 different countries and from 30 different states. So when we think of ourselves as an international organization with a wide geographic reach, in fact, that's the reality now for the ANS, and I think that's really extraordinary. We used to say that before, but I think with all the programs that are online and available to people in all the different time zones, granted, some people are getting up very early and other people are having dinner, but they join together for these programs, and it creates this really extraordinary community. So for that, really, all of you are directly responsible, and I want to thank you. We all thank you for your generosity and your incredible expression of support of this institution. So let's see if this works. Here we go. So today I have the privilege of unveiling 2 new donor plaques that were recently added to the benefactors wall, which is actually behind us here. Lottie Sultan and the National Endowment for the Humanities, which you see at the bottom there. The wall acknowledges cumulative donations and grants of $500,000 and over from individuals, organizations, and foundations. The addition of these 2 brings the number of benefactors acknowledged on this wall to 92. The gift from the estate of Donald Patrick, which Uta mentioned, will bring this number to 93. And you probably could have done that math, but I thought I should say that. And his plaque will be installed later this year. We are a very small community, but one with a long and distinguished history. And it's rather remarkable, I think, that the first plaques on that wall are representative of gifts the first plaque went up in 1906. So with today's additions, this wall now spans 115 years. And it bears witness to the foresight of our benefactors who, with their generosity, have ensured that this society has survived and thrived for more than a century and a half, and today shows no signs of slowing down. These large bequests represent a significant percentage of the revenue received in fiscal 2021, as you've heard, but they also dramatically demonstrate the importance to the society of estate planning. So I'd like to remind any of you for whom this is a consideration to think about leaving a legacy to the ANS. I want to emphasize, however, that we're grateful for all the donations that came in, both large and small, and we appreciate every one of them. Several donors, for example, send us $25 every month in support, happens to be in support of the Mantis Collections database. They feel that their ability to remotely access the Society's collection is fundamental to their numismatic curiosity, and they want to help in a way that they can. Members of the Augustus Be Safe Society, on the other hand, make an annual commitment of at least $2,500. And this level of support allows us to maintain and create programming with the knowledge that there will be financial resources to pay for it. And of course, we're also beholden to the largesse of our trustees, who every year are instinting not only with their time and expertise, but also with their financial support. So thank you. Much of the annual donations received, we receive are to our general fund, which critically supports the work that we do here on a daily basis, as well as quite literally keeps the lights on. Others have chosen to support specific projects that are near and dear to their hearts and are very important to the ANS as well. And Gilles has already mentioned many of these. all the support, whether general or targeted, sends a very strong message to us here at the ANS that you are committed and determined to partner with us in keeping this institution alive and flourishing. I just want to reference the gala for a second, that this year the gala will be in person again at the Harvard Club here in New York City on Thursday, January 13th. So mark your calendars if it's something you're able to attend. And we are honored and privileged to be able to honor our ANS Vice President and Adjunct Curator, David Hendon, at this event. And I'm sure it'll be a wonderful evening, and I hope you can join us. So members are really critical to the society. Everything we do is really about you. And I want to stress that you play a vital role here. Your enthusiastic participation with many of our programs launched and enhanced over the last year has been gratifying and has given us a vision of how best we are able to serve you in the future. I can't say much more about that except to say that right now our membership stands at 1,600, which is a number that we were aspiring to in the last couple of years, but finally attained. And I think that is a testament to all the work that the staff has been doing to keep people engaged, whether it was during the lockdown for everybody, but moving into the future now so that they can participate with the ANS even if they're not here in New York City. And two of the people that help us do that are in my department. So before I turn the podium over to David Hill, I just want to mention Austin Andrews, who you saw previously, who's helping with the Collier Prize Award, who's in charge of our membership, and Emma Pratt, who's not here today, but who's responsible for the design of our online and print communications. So much of what you see, including e-news and our print materials, our invitations, are designed by Emma. She's also the assistant photographer here. So as I thank you, I also want to thank them. The ANS is a small staff with big goals. They work hard to keep you informed and connected. And to all of you, thank you again for everything you do to make the society great and enduring. And I'll turn this over to David Hill.
Thank you, Michelle. No? Okay, good. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm going to begin by highlighting some of the acquisitions of the library and archives over the past year. One of the most significant was the Sultan papers, which came to us following the death of Lottie Sultan last year at the age of 96. The Sultans were very generous to the ANS over the years, and this included, as has been mentioned, a $500,000 bequest to the society that came to us in her will to the ANS. So we're thrilled to be able to help preserve their legacy and memory with these papers. These include 17 cubic feet of archival and printed materials, coin photographs and tickets and research papers and correspondence and records of coin purchases going back to the 1940s. The earliest letters concern Mark's immediate post-war experiences, and there are records documenting the fate of his father, coin dealer Felix Schlesinger, who was killed at Auschwitz in 1944. The Sultan's generosity is also demonstrated in these materials, with some items relating to their exhibits over the years, and where they lent their not only materials but their knowledge of numismatics. Okay, there we go. Now, I'd like to thank the trustees and executors of Lottie Sultan's will, especially Iris Rizak and Alan Stahl and Catherine Conroy. And I'd also like to thank Norman Pepin, who I'm happy to see is here today. Norman, where is he? There he is. I want to thank him for, I spent one day out of the very many that he spent up there in Hartsdale in their apartment. He was very instrumental in helping us get a lot of auction catalogs, very important ones that were annotated by the Sultans, by Mark Sultan. And another great addition this year was this 1804 print from Tony Terranova, and we were both Tonys here, of course. And we were just in there admiring this. I think it looks fantastic where it is here, of Alexander Hamilton, an 1804 print from, Hamilton, a banker, first Treasury Secretary, and also Broadway star these days, right? So, he's keeping this stern and watchful eye now over the library, and I like it when I see this every day now, so it's perfect. Okay, here we go. Okay, and I do want to say also, as usual, Tony dropped off many other things for the library every time he comes down here, so it's fantastic. And I'd like to highlight also these other materials that he gave, these things. He acquired these for the sale, at the sale of the Richard Margolis's library. These are a significant group of archival materials that relate to Richard Margolis's book, Benjamin Franklin in Terracotta. The ANS library has about 1,000 books in its rare book room from the 15th, 16th, and 1700s. And thanks to Jonathan Kagan, we have added the 1692 work on the coins and antiquities of Lawrence Beguer, caretaker of the Royal Library and the collections for King Frederick I of Prussia. In 2020, the ANS published Jim McClellan's book on French jetons, and afterwards he presented his personal collection of them to the Society. And as part of this gift, he gave the archives his files, a meticulous record of the collection. David Fanning donated a nice copy of Edgar Adams' Fixed Price List #1 from December 1913, along with 2 plates to replace those missing from the ANS's only plated copy of Chapman's famous Bushnell sale of 1882. These plates were missing, although my predecessor from the 19-teens always collated what was in these books, and those plates were there when he collated this, probably in about 1912. And so somebody noticed this online, that these plates were missing, and David Fanning happily donated a couple that he had. Len Augsburger, on behalf of the Newman Portal, gave a group of index cards for medals belonging to Henry and Emery Norweb, which have now been added to their collection inventories that we already house in the archives. Valentin Jeparidze has again made a significant donation, this time 43 Russian books and auction catalogs. And this was another time that we leaned heavily on the multiple foreign language skills of our part-time cataloger, James Woodstock, who is, in this case, a native speaker of Russian, although he speaks many other languages and reads many other languages. Alex Arthur Dumeau of West Virginia donated an eclectic assortment of 82 books, many filled with significant holes in the collection, but others were given with the understanding that they would be sold to benefit the library. For over 100 years, the ANS has sold duplicate books that it didn't need to benefit the library. And this has become a lot easier now and cost-effective and more efficient with the establishment of our eBay store and the hiring of John Thomason, who runs it and takes care of the things that are on there. John has listed 164 items for us since we started doing this in February. This is just in the library. And this has generated about $6,500 for the library since February. Now, I mentioned this Margolis sale. We also have been able now to buy some things. And so we've gotten some interesting things this year. And so from the Margolis sale, we acquired some books and catalogs that the library lacked. But we also worth noting is this remarkable set of 71 pamphlets issued in France between 1789 and 1801, documenting the birth of modern French coinage during the time of the French Revolution. The Sultan Library was also auctioned off this year by Colby and Fanning, just last month, actually. And we were able to get a few things at that auction as well, including a very rare set of German auction catalogs from the 1700s, which catalogs from the 1700s or coin catalogs from the 1700s are always rare. So we're very happy to have those. We don't have so many from that time period. And we also got a number of bid books of the Hamburger firm, who are family relatives of the Sultan Schlesingers. With gratitude to Hadrian Rambach, who helped with the logistics of this purchase, the ANS acquired at auction a group of richly decorated early 19th century certificates and letters from the French numismatist Theodore Edme Mionnet, the curator in what became the numismatic department of the Bibliothèque Nationale. The ANS's partnership with the Numismatic portal is entering its seventh year, and there are now about 12,000 listings of items from the ANS library and archives online. The most recent of which are the full set of proceedings and surveys from the International Numismatic Congresses, just in time for our Congress coming up in this fall, and the ANS's full run of Glendinning auction catalogs, as well as the final portion of the Chapman brothers correspondence, which was a very long-running project. The daily scanning is done by Laura Jacobs, but this year we also had Nicole Fry stop in from Internet Archive to handle some of the oversized materials that we couldn't do with our local setup. And I would like to thank Len Augsburger and everyone at the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society for their ongoing support of the project, which goes far beyond employing these people to do the scanning here, but also using those resources to actually work with the materials and upgrade those materials that we have. So they do additional work than just scanning here, and they do things to benefit us locally, and also with other support that they give. Okay, so the newest finds in the Chapman records was the subject of the first of 4 articles I wrote for ANS Magazine this year. These included in the records themselves the earliest item of the records, which was a letter sent by the Chapman's mother from Ireland in 1855, before the Chapman's parents had even settled in the U.S. And also in there is a very interesting example of one of the first photographic IDs, which we found in the collection, dating from 1876. The Sultan Papers provided the background for another article, this one focusing on the tragic wartime experiences of Mark's family and his efforts to recover materials and receive compensation for personal losses, and also for those of the Schlesinger firm. I also wrote about Eunice Work, a professor at Wheaton College in Massachusetts, who developed a working relationship with the ANS in the 1930s, helping to build the Society's photo file at that time, and also bringing numismatic education to her students. Another subject was the remarkable transformation of the ANS at the dawn of the 20th century under the influence of Archer Huntington, where I had the opportunity to use a great set of records that we have in the archives, questionnaires that were filled out by members in the 1890s. The increase in the Society's number of online forums has provided great opportunities to study and show off the ANS's holdings for me. Some of the long table topics that I have done included archival collections relating to such interesting characters as Chester Beach, John Riley, Oscar Roti, Bernard Morgenthau, and the Chapmans. Likewise, our Pocket Change blog is a great place for writing about interesting topics. And my favorite this year, I think, was the letters that Sidney Noe got from the bodybuilder Charles Atlas, who I remember, of course, from his these comic book advertisements that used to be, famously featuring a bully kicking sand in the face of a 97-pound weakling. So there was a medal that he did, and he wondered if the museum would be open. He could come see it. He was thrilled that the ANS was displaying this medal that they used to give for bodybuilding achievements. Another place I talked about our collections was the New York Numismatic Club, where my presentation on the Chapman brothers this is an absolute thrill for me, was attended by one of Henry Chapman's granddaughters. Afterwards, she donated a notebook used by a young Henry for Latin exercises and as an address book. He used it as an address book. But I mean, it's just incredible to me that, she doesn't remember him, but he would certainly have known her. So Henry Chapman would have known this woman who showed up at this. And then she gave us that address book. So that was a real thrill. Almost going to make it all the way through. Okay, we are pleased to have our volunteer interns back on site. Library science and history student Jared Goldfarb, among other things, has been cataloging the French Revolution pamphlets that I just mentioned earlier. Aviram Cohen has primarily been helping me sort through these piles of unprocessed materials that have accumulated over time and sometimes for decades, frankly. Harriet Williams, many of these items that we find in these piles are auction catalogs, and she has a library science degree, and she's been doing this library cataloging of these hundreds of these auction catalogs for us. It's really fantastic, and this is all volunteer work that these people are doing. So I want to really thank them. And I want to thank everyone that's helped out the ANS this year, and particularly the library here. As usual, I can't fit it on one slide, so I want to thank everyone that has, helped us out so much at the ANS and particularly in the library. And now I'd like to hand it over to our Director of Publications, Andrew Reinhardt.
In theory? Okay. All right. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I'm finishing my 7th year as the Director of Publications here at the ANS. That's me in the comic. So we'll start off with books. On the first slide, we have 3 books that were published by the American Numismatic Society in the past fiscal year, including The Early Antigonids by Katerina Panakopoulou, Faustina the Younger by Martin Beckman, and also Sid Martin's final book-length monograph, which was the subject of his lecture for the award last year. And so these are available to purchase. Buy several copies, please. We did 2 volumes co-published with Cambridge University Press in the Coinage of the Ancient World series that we do with them, from Lee Yarrow and then also from Lisa Callett and Jack Kroll. And this is a plug for David Hendon's upcoming book. I spent the last fiscal year working with him on it. David, this is a pleasure to work on with you. Publishing is a collaboration and a team sport, and there's nothing better than waking up in the morning and seeing emails from David, going to bed at night, seeing emails from David, and getting up in the middle of the night to do whatever and seeing emails from David. And it was an awesome collaboration. It is at the printer and it'll ship in December. So keep an eye out for it. Thank you very much. As far as periodicals go, once again, we had another great AJN. And so, probably a dozen articles, 14 articles. Thanks also to Oliver Hoover as being managing editor, Nathan Elkins for being the editor of the ancient stuff, and David Yoon, of course, being the editor for medieval and modern. I appreciate all of the help. Our other journal, now 4 years in the making, is the Journal of Early American Numismatics, edited by Christopher R. McDowell in Cincinnati. And we did 10 articles last year. Some of them were gigantic and some of which won awards, which is wonderful for us and wonderful for the authors. And as I'm talking about these publications, for those of you watching and for those of you here in the audience, send us manuscripts. You're doing research, you're really interested in what you're up to. We'd love to publish you. So we got the magazine, we got the books, we've got the journals. Other things for publications, of course, Peter Van Alphen is the editor-in-chief of the ANS magazine, with Lynn Cole as our art director and designer, and Joanne Isaac managing our advertising. So I know that's a thankless task, but let me say thank you to Joanne. So we did 4 issues yet again, including the Collier there on the second cover. And once again, we won a lot of awards this year from the Numismatic Literary Guild. We won 7, 4 of which are for publications specifically. And you can take a look at the slide deck and watch the video after the fact to get a better idea about what's there. David Hill mentioned the Pocket Change blog earlier. We published 54 posts in the past year, which is a lot. We try to put them out on Tuesdays. So keep an eye out for those. Thanks to all the staff, fellows, trustees, and whatnot who have contributed to the publication and creation of that knowledge content. This has been part of our mission, to use digital materials in order to communicate what we're doing at the ANS to everyone. We also did the Planchette Podcast. I am your host, and so you've probably heard me online if you've listened. In the past fiscal year, we've done a handful of episodes. It did win Best Audio for the Numismatic Literary Guild as well, and so you can have a listen there wherever you get your podcast. These are free, and so if you have 45 minutes, have a listen. And I wanted to thank you very much for your time. Keep reading.
Thank you, Andrew. See if we can get this rolling. There we go. All right, so over the course of the last year, the curatorial team has continued with its pandemic-induced efforts to create more and better online content for our members. Aside from hosting many of our Friday afternoon long tables and our monthly money talks, recordings of these can be found on our YouTube channel. The curatorial team has also been making weekly contributions to Pocket Change, the ANS's blog, which Andrew just highlighted, and many of these blog posts in turn have been expanded into more in-depth articles in our ever-popular ANS magazine. We've also been creating some shorter videos for YouTube, including our new Greatest Coins series, which so far have featured episodes on the Athenian owl, the Eidmar denarius, Nero's Ostius Sesterces, the French franc, the Brasher doubloon, and the 1804 US dollar. So those of you who have not yet checked out the YouTube channel or the blog, please take the opportunity to do so. At the same time, we've been continuing to plug away at improving our online database, Mantis, and in the next several months, many improvements will be readily visible, both because of general upgrading, like our back-end shift to a better cataloging system, but also because of specialized projects, like the Early Modern European Coinage Project, which David Yoon will be discussing in a few minutes. And here, I want to give a shout out to Emma Pratt, who has been photographing the roughly 22,000 coins associated with this project as fast as David can give them to her. I'm also happy to report, too, that we received an additional substantial grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities for $150,000 to develop yet another component of our online resource, Hellenistic Royal Coinages, this one focusing on Indo-Greek and Bactrian coinage. This project, called Oxus Indus, is co-directed by myself and Ethan Gruber, alongside our Oxford University-based colleagues, Andrew Meadows and Simon Glenn, along with help from Gunnar Dumke at Halle University in Germany and Asma Ibrahim at the State Bank in Pakistan. And now the first version of Oxus Indus we're hoping will be launched sometime this next spring. The Roman Republican Die Project, yet another of our superb online resources and one that holds great promise of transforming the way we study the coinage of the Roman Republic, saw a lot of updates this year and improvements, which Lucia Carboni will be talking about in just a few moments. And like other institutions, our educational efforts this year went mostly online, with invitations to teach courses or give lectures remotely at places like Howard University in Washington, D.C., and Koç University's Ahmet Center in Turkey. Here at home, because of the uncertainties of the pandemic, sadly, we decided to cancel the Eric P. Newman Graduate Summer Seminar for the second year in a row. And hopefully this next year we'll finally be able to start it up again. And instead this year we focused our teaching efforts on a new online initiative called ANS Lyceum. This year, and this is a educational forum which is open not just to members, but also to the general public. And this year the curators offered 3 6-week courses, one on Greek, one on Roman, and one on US coinages, which actually is still ongoing, has 1 more week to go, as well as a shorter course on coin photography taught by Alan Roach. Response to all of these courses this year has been overwhelmingly positive, so ANS Lyceum will be something that we'll continue with this next year in addition to the summer seminar. And in a glimpse of things to come, we were thrilled to be able to welcome back students in person to the ANS recently. And just a few weeks ago, in fact, Lucia Carbone hosted undergraduates from the Classics Department at CUNY Brooklyn for a lecture on Roman coinage, of course, all masked, of course. Now, research by the curatorial team this last year has continued unabated, with many new articles and chapters appearing in a variety of journals and other publications. And at the same time, many of us were invited to present our current research, both remotely as well as in person, at a number of conferences, both here in the US as well as around the world, including conferences on medieval studies, Peruvian economic history, digital humanities, and one on the very first plague in the late Roman period. And we also presented at venues including the University of Virginia, Cambridge University, Tübingen University, Macquarie University in Australia, the Art Institute of Chicago, and the Belgian Archaeological School in Athens. So we got around, even though we didn't. So the crowning achievements of our research endeavors, however, this year were two conferences that we organized ourselves. The first, entitled Coinage of the Roman Provinces Before Provincial Coinage, was held in March and was co-organized by Lucia Carbone, who again will provide details in a moment. And the second one, the Coinage of the Americas Conference on the Victor David Brenner Sesquicentennial, was held just this last month and was co-organized by Jesse Kraft, who likewise will provide details on that in a moment. And just as Gilles did a few moments ago, I also want to salute the monumental technical efforts of Ben Hibner and Ellen Roche, who learned on the fly this last year how to produce our conferences and other online content, and especially these more complicated hybrid events like the COAC conference, as well as this very meeting. We really could not have done this without them. I also want to salute Jesse Kraft for his extraordinary efforts in arranging the shipment from Nevada to Brooklyn of nearly 100 tons of our Medallic Art Company die shells and galvanos. This required weeks of weeks of travel and hard backbreaking labor, which I learned myself once the trucks arrived, on top of everything else that Jesse was doing this last year. And on a closing note, I'd like to introduce John Thomason, who you can see in the center of the photo on the bottom, who broke a sweat along with us unloading the trucks, who joined the curatorial team about a year ago, initially to oversee our eBay store, which he'll be telling you about, but has since been promoted to Deputy Collections Manager to help our long-serving Collections Manager, Dr. Elena Stoljarek, who now will showcase some of our recent gifts and acquisitions and loans. So Elena, all yours.
Good evening. Another year has passed, as you know, and during this year we were very delighted to see that despite of COVID pandemic, people still thought about us, and we would like to express our deep appreciation to everyone who continue to fill gaps in our collections. We acknowledge and thank them all. Some of this gift must be singled out for special mention. Not everything, don't worry, but some of them. Dr. Joanne Galst enriched our coin cabinet with a group of the coins from the collection of her late husband, ANS fellow and longtime friend, Dr. J. Galst, who died from complications of COVID and who is still deeply missed here. Among the coins is a Sumerian cuneiform oval of the 4th century BC and a silver imitative Athenian type tetradrachm of 400 BC from a Philistine mint with a letter Aleph on Athenian cheek. I don't know how, maybe, yeah. Here, I don't know. The same gift also contained a silver coin of Diodotus Tryphon and several silver denominations of Antiochus VIII and Antiochus IX from Samaria. The group of Roman provincial coins includes a very rare Assaria to Assaria of Titus as Caesar from Bithynia and a rare bronze coin of Elagabalus from Sepphoris da Caesarea. Later coins in this gift is a medieval silver Gigliato of Grand Master of the Knights Hospitalier in Rhodes. James McClellan III, author of the recent ANS monograph, Old Regime, France and its jetons, donated his outstanding collection of French jetons to ANS. An earlier example in this issue, in 1585, issued during the reign of Henry III, was used as a reckoning counter. Later, it's this slide. Later, under the reign of Louis XIV and Louis XV, the design of the jetons changed to glorify the monarchs, to glorify the kings. And we're also very grateful to have received a group of French medals from the Dr. MacLean. And some of these medals were designed by Jean Mauger, one of the most prolific artists of the reign of Louis XIV. His medal usually depicts the king in long wig on the obverse and glorifies special events where king commemorated king on the reverse. We also receive a beautiful gold-plated medal dedicated to the birth of Dauphin, of the elder son of the Louis XV, designed by Jean de Vivier, it's obverse, and Michel Auguste Troeg, reverse. One of the curious, very curious piece in Dr. McClellan's donation is a silver Russian medal dedicated to the establishment under the Empress Catherine the Great. It's on the top here. I don't know, here. Of Russian Academy in 1783. This academy has been founded under the guidance of a Princess Ekaterina Dashkova, a gifted intellectual and a close friend to Empress. And what is interesting, that in 1789, Dashkova became a first woman elected to the American Philosophical Society through the sponsorship of Benjamin Franklin. From the ANS fellow Scott Miller, the Society received 2 uniface bronze plaques with realistic profile portraits of the McCartney family children, designed by the young, at that time, and very talented American artist, Ida McClellan Stout from Chicago. Longtime member Edron Coldiron continued to enrich our medal collection with new attractive examples. This year, he donated a beautiful Art Nouveau French medal bearing an image of Marianne, as you know, it's French Republic symbol, and a group of Art Deco Belgian medals. From the same gift, the Society also obtained an interesting example commemorating the beginning of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1937. A remarkable donation to our British medal candidate came from life fellow Eric Engstrom. His gift includes numerous items devoted to the Sir Winston Churchill life at different stages of his career. Most of the medals were produced by various British and world-famous artists, like this one. I want to show you, like this one, who were produced on the right, on the top, by Dora de Pedery Hunt, who in 2003 was presented the Saltus Award by the ANS. And I like this medal very much because here you can see a long list of outstanding statesmen in his retired time. Our South Asian department expanded with a group of 19th and 20th century Philippine coins, banknote, and other currency, donated by Carlson Chambliss. Over 90 coins cover the Spanish and American colonial period and from about 1833 to 1947. We also received various emergency issues produced in Philippines during the World War II by anti-Japanese forces, and also obtained over 300 banknotes of the Philippine Republic dated to 1951 to 2015. A group of African objects came from our longtime member, Alan Helms. These elaborate, as you can see, iron examples probably were made by Mongo people in the Congo Basin and the Fang people in Gabon and Equatorial Guinea, and apparently serve as insignia of high status. From our late life fellow, David Minchell, the NS received a set of dedicated to Mayflower 400th anniversary. It's a set of proof medals, silver medal and coin, jointly issued by the Royal Mint in United Kingdom and the US Mint. Dr. Minchell also donated a group of coins which honor significant innovations and pioneering efforts in each of the 50 US states. It's a big series. One of the ways that our objects reach a broad audience is through loans to other museums. And curatorial staff provided backup and consultation for these borrowing institutions. Here are some recent highlights. At the beginning of this month, and at the beginning of October, the NS coins from the Greek and Roman collection arrived at the Getty Museum in California to be part of forthcoming exhibit, Persia, Ancient Iran, and the Classical World. This exhibit will explore the political, religious, and artistic relation between Greece, Rome, and Persia, focusing on three significant phases of Persian history: the Achaemenid, Parthian, and Sasanian dynasties, and how they interacted with their classical neighbors. If someone of you plan to go to California, this show will be on view till August 2022, and believe me, it will be a splendid show. We also renewed the NS loan to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and thousands of visitors are able to see the Society's precious objects on display at the archaic, classical, Hellenistic, and Cypriot art galleries. Additional ANS coins can be found throughout the Roman and Byzantine permanent exhibition halls. The gold coins from the Society's collection, including the medieval Florence, Genoa, and 17th century England, are now on exhibit at the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art in Washington, D.C. This object became a part of very successful traveling exhibit, Caravan of Gold, organized by the Block Museum of Art of Northwestern University, Illinois. And they will be on view under February 2022. The International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, United Kingdom, explores issues linking the America with Liverpool, and the Society Charleston Slave Badge from the early 19th century is an essential component of the permanent display dedicated to the history of transatlantic slavery and its legacy. And lastly, in recognition of the gift of service, we would like to express our special thanks to the curatorial department volunteer, Scott Miller and Eric Krause, for their devoted work for the medals and United States collections. We also would like to thank Jihara Knowles, a curatorial intern, for her valuable help and assistance with multiple projects. Thank you all, and thank you for your attention and patience. And now I will give turn to our Roman curator, Lucia Carbone.
So, it's a pleasure to see you now in person, first of all, and I'll be very brief since Peter has already said so much about what we've done in the curatorial department. So that's me, of course. So I'll begin then with what we've already seen. So the coinage, the conference we organized, unfortunately virtually, given COVID, but for the coinage of the Roman provinces before provincial coinage. And our first vice president, David Andin, was also one of the speakers, but we had 20 speakers from really all over the world, very prestigious. I mean, we see some of them. Of course, you recognize here our adjunct curator, Oliver Hoover, and perhaps you recognize me. But I will show you, these are the celebration, but just to give the idea of who was there. For example, François de Calatay, Andy Meadows was the chair, and so on. You see Annalisa Polosa from Sapienza, David Andin. So there were like 3 days of really fantastic conference, which was incredibly well attended. We had 250 people who actually were attending it and registered, and were attending most of the, we had most of the sessions at least 150 people tuned in. So for us it was great. And this will, this conference will produce a volume of proceedings which are intended as a commentary for the catalog of the Wuchonki collection that actually is coming to completion. So should be, both of them should be out in 2022. So we're really getting there finally. Then let me, so this is just a second. And this is the second project, which is very important to relate, because these of course have to give thanks first of all to Ethan Gruber. And I'm the co-director of this project, together with Professor Oliviero, who is now one of the fellows, newly elected fellow. And I will talk in a second also about our fantastic curatorial assistant that we hired, thanks to the support of the Arete Foundation, which is Alice Sharpless, very soon to be Dr. Alice Sharpless, who is helping us. So as you see, I mean, we discussed this in several blog posts, perhaps some of you, and some, and actually one ANS magazine article, but some of you may be aware, so it will be just very brief, that back in 2019, Richard Schaefer, who held this gigantic paper archive and with all the known to him dies for the whole Roman Republican coinage, agreed to have all his paper archive scanned. And so there was actually somebody, professional hired, who stay at his home for 2 months, scanning everything. So I'll just be very brief on this. You gave some examples of this paper archive. So we tried to, of course, put it online, and it's already online. And there are some specific issues, which are this ODAC, which means one die for every control mark. So we can really count what is the production of the Roman mint. But you can read all of this actually in our blog posts. So I will not keep you more on this. Of course, if you have questions, very welcome. But you can have here some stats that give you the idea of what has been done since we actually hired Alice, which is our curatorial assistant. So this is since the beginning of the summer. So this is what we've done. We released all these RRC types. They're very important because we are focusing on the seminal years, of 90 to 70 BC. So really the civil wars, and we don't have any historiography, any comprehensive historiographical narration on this narrative of this. So this is very important. You have just an idea of the number of specimens that have been added. As you see, there are almost 7,000 that are added to CRRO, and you can see them. So really, we have all these specimens from catalogs. So on top of what we have on CRRO, now actually on top of all the images from the museums that are already on CRRO, we have many more images. And we have exactly almost 2,000 dies now in RRDP. So really, we have a lot. And as I said, Liv and I are the scientific directors, but nothing could have been done without Alice Sharpless, and you see her. So thank you, Alice. And also, I have to say that we have to thank Sarah Cox, who helped us in the first steps, let's say, of the digitization of this process. So thank you very much. And the next one here for you is Dr. Jesse Kraft, which I don't know where here he is. Okay. So Jesse.
Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to advance that slide, the Americas. It's me, Jesse C. Kraft. So I want to talk about two projects that I worked on this fiscal year. The first is the Medallic Art Project. Continuing that, as many of you know, the ANS purchased the archives to Medallic Art Company in 2018. It was the largest purchase that the ANS had ever made up to that point, and that continues to hold true. This is the project that I worked primarily on this year was moving the die shells from Nevada to New York. And this here is a die shell. This here is a die shell. This is actually what gets stuck onto the Janvier reduction machine. It could be a galvano, it could be an epoxy, and this here is actually an epoxy that was then plated with zinc. So there are many different types. There were 17,000 die shells that we had to move from Nevada to New York City. First we had to find proper storage for this, which was proved difficult. It took 2 weeks in Nevada to process everything while we were there. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like my slideshow is working, but that is okay. There we go. Okay, so that was the spreadsheet that I had to make in order to progress. This is me and Rob Vigdeveen in Nevada. He was indispensable help while we were there. These, you can see boxes of die shells that we had to pack and repack. They were improperly packed in 2017 due to the speed and the nature of that move. This is the final pallets getting packed onto the truck in Nevada. This is our storage space that we secured in Brooklyn. As Gilles can attest to, this was a nightmare. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with brokers in real estate in New York City, but it's not fun. This is us accepting the first truckload into Manhattan. Into Brooklyn. It was the tightest squeeze. John Thomason, our curatorial assistant, can attest to that. This is some of the first pallets. The interesting thing about these die shells is that about half of them that were actually produced in New York City and left in the 1970s when Mako relocated. So for a lot of these, this really truly was a homecoming for many of these die shells. I would like to thank John Thomason, Peter Van Alphen, for helping me out during this process of unloading, as well as, of course, Rob Vigdavine, who was indispensable for me while in Nevada. And of course, part of the reason that we brought all of this here was to begin processing it. With all of this material in Nevada, it was very difficult to send one of us out there. So now that it is here in Brooklyn, we can begin processing it, which is a major accomplishment. And I would like to thank my volunteer Rowan Schiff for that. So next, okay. As was briefly discussed about earlier by Peter Van Alphen, we have resurrected the Coinage of the Americas Conference, which is a big deal for us. We have had 17 COACs in the past. This was our first COAC in about a dozen years, since 2009. This year, we decided to focus on famed sculptor Victor David Brenner, who is also a very, very important member for the INS throughout his years as a member here from the 1890s into the 1920s. This year also marks the 150th anniversary of his birth. So that was the impetus for celebrating him. We had many submissions. We had to narrow it down to about 10 that ranged from the path to the penny. I did a little talk on Mako and Brenner. We had Brenner's new discoveries of him in the archives, new discovery of his work, A Song to Nature, his influence by painter Sorolla, and works on like the Cincinnati medal. Peter did a great presentation on the Prince Henry medal, and so on and so forth. This here you can see our exhibition on Brenner that we did in the next room, in the Sage Room. So I highly recommend you check that out as well while you're here. Lastly, I would like to thank Ben and Alan. You've heard of our control room that is literally controlling us right now. That's the picture of it from over there. So that's the control room. And I would like to thank Ben and Alan for that, as well as our two main funders, the Resolute Americana Collection, as well as the Stack family. So thank you very much for that. And please do expect COACs on hopefully a biannual basis moving forward. So thank you. All right. That. All right, my last thing I want to talk about very briefly, I asked Elena if I can talk about one of the donations because they've been very near and dear to me. These plastic slides by William Guild. If you have been to any of the conventions that we have been to since the pandemic has ended, you have seen Austin and I demonstrating these plastic slides. You probably saw that picture. I think this is the third time. I would also like to point out that my lovely wife, Natalie, took that picture, so thank you for that. It has been a big major teaching tool for us while at these conventions. People are able to see this giant screen from across the room and really acts as a magnet for them for us. It's literally been called the coolest thing I've seen at the entire show. So we went from we went from this kind of like little table that people tried to intentionally get past because they saw the books and they thought we were kind of a lowly bunch. But since we now have something to attract them with, they found out they're actually pretty cool. So I would like to thank Viken Yegparian for this donation, and it has been nothing short of phenomenal. So thank you. I believe that's it for me. Thank you. Next, we have Mr. David Yoon. So thank you.
Okay. Hi. For the departments under my care, the main activity over the past year has been improving the presentation of the European coins of the 16th and 17th centuries in our Mantus database. This complicated historical period is where the medieval and modern departments overlap, which has made focusing on this portion of the collection especially useful. The most important part of this project has been getting the coins photographed. During the past year, we have added photos to the records for almost 4,000 coins from this period, bringing the total with photos now to nearly 10,000. The other half of this project is standardizing the data for describing these coins. This unreadable table shows a very small segment of a spreadsheet containing the controlled vocabulary we are developing for the rulers in whose names the coins were issued, in this case of various Italian states. We now have at least a rough draft for almost all of the rulers and most of the coin issuing states of non-Ottoman Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, although much work remains to get all of it integrated into our online database. Since last October, volume 32 of the American Journal of Numismatics has been printed, and volume 33 has gone to the printers. Unfortunately, supply chain issues caused by the COVID pandemic mean that printed copies will probably not be available before February. In the meantime, we are working on volume 34 and hoping to get it published in a more timely manner. Regrettably, the contents of volume 34 will be less diverse than I would have liked, because almost all of the articles submitted were on ancient Greek or Roman topics. I hope we will receive more on medieval, modern, and non-Mediterranean topics for next year. As time allows, I continue researching problems of organization, production, and circulation for medieval Spain, from Visigothic pseudo-imperials to Aragonese florins. And finally, without repeating Elena's descriptions, I want to express my own particular thanks for two major donations: Jim McClellan's gift of French jetons for the modern department, and Carlson Chambliss's gift of Filipino coins and currency for the South Asian department. And now I will hand it over to our Deputy Collections Manager, John Thomason.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Thomason, and in addition to being the new Deputy Collections Manager, I also head and run our eBay store, which is what I'm here to talk about today. So for those of you who do not know, the ANS's eBay store was established on November 11th, 2020. It's not even a year old yet. And the first auctions closed on December 5th of 2020. In this last fiscal year, we were able to grow this eBay store from really just a humble idea to become a eBay top-rated seller, which in the words of eBay, means we are one of eBay's most reputable sellers who consistently delivers outstanding customer service. And if you have by chance purchased something and emailed me on a weekend, I respond right away. I really do try to bring a real strong element of customer service to this store. We're also a reputable seller with 390 followers of folks who follow and like the store to keep up with our sales. And currently we have 588 positive reviews with a 100% positivity feedback rating and no negative reviews. Although I'm waiting for that first negative review to roll in. I'm sure it will happen one day. It's bound to happen to everyone. So in the 2020-21 fiscal year, the ANS eBay store completed over 1,000 listings. We're actually up to around 1,200 as of today, and a total sale price of over $73,000. And one thing to note is that the average sale price was $71 per listing. And this is actually for single items. We do very few lots. So this is actually a really great thing. These are single individual items such as books, coins or tokens that are bringing in that $71 per listing. And some of the categories of items that we've done to date, as you can see here, we've got coins, tokens, mostly Civil War tokens, metals, mostly Mako metals, a little bit of paper money, quite a few books from the library, and then a few odds and ends, like Frank Sparrow plasters. And as you can see, coins have brought in the most, but we've got quite strong sales in books, as well as the token and metal category. Overall, the future is looking very bright for the ANS eBay store. We're on pace to continue to deliver around 100 listings per month at minimum, and we'll continue to offer a diverse array of objects as we have been. We're also making strides to optimize our shipping procedures and leverage postage through eBay when it's advantageous to do so, which actually saves ANS quite a bit of money. So I actually handle all of the shipping as well, and getting those books out can be a little bit of a challenge, but thankfully eBay makes it easier. We're also exploring fixed price listings for certain ANS publications that are in-house at 75 Varick Street as additional way to sell those books that are here. And I just want to close with this fact that we have a ton of repeat customers on our eBay store. People keep coming back, and that's great because they continue to drive up the prices. Those folks will post positive reviews, and this creates a nice positive feedback loop because more folks see those positive reviews. They have confidence that they can bid, reliably with us, and it just drives more sales, more folks to the page. And so I'm really looking forward to this next year with the eBay store. Thank you.
So we started that meeting almost 2 hours ago. So it's time to thank everybody. When I read the program, I thought, what closing remarks? No, I'm not going to do any closing remarks. Just to thank everybody. Have a very nice evening. See you at VNS. We have reopened now. See you in one of our con shows, the New York Numismatic, Warsaw, or here before next year. So have a very nice evening and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the American Numismatic Society's YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like our online resources, publication, and events, you can support the Society by becoming a member. And don't forget to check out our book and eBay stores. The links are below.